I'll be giving you the secret to succeed in business in Africa. And this is because we've noticed that a lot of new businesses fail. According to the US Bureau of Labor and Statistics, that is the BLS, about 20% of new businesses fail within the first 2 years of opening and 45% during the first 5 years. Now, 65% of new businesses manage to take it to the 10th year before failing, and only about 25% of businesses actually make it to the 15th year and more. And this is because most people just start up businesses maybe because of the passion they've got for certain things or their emotions, without considering the necessary factors like the market study or the business sector in which they are about to invest in. So today I'll be giving you the 5 pillars of businesses in Africa. I am going to be helping you make sure that you are at least among the 25% that take their businesses to at least 15 years of existence and more. But before I dive into that, there's something very important that I want you to understand. The African economy is actually booming now more than ever before, and there's actually some sort of scramble for Africa. Since the African World Report projected that Africa's millionaires is going to be increasing by 42% in the next 10 years, a lot of African entrepreneurs and even the non-African ones have been rushing to invest in Africa and tap from these sectors I am going to be revealing to you today. So like I said earlier, the reason why I am giving you these 5 pillars is because I don't want you to be left out, alright? I want you to be part of those millionaires in at most 10 years time, and we are starting right now. So I will be giving you 5 business sectors in which if you invest your money, you will never need to work again. And if you are new to the channel, my name is Elvin Chick and you're watching Africa Today. So we are going to be starting with the food sector or the food industry. Yes, as humans, we need to eat. People will always need to eat before doing whatsoever they've got to do. So there's no way you could ever go wrong if you invest your money in the food sector. Now, what you need to do is study the food market in Africa and abroad. So consider the following options: food production, food processing or manufacturing, food marketing, food distribution, and food services or catering. You can also consider the animal farming, alright? Now, when it comes to the categories of food, focus on things like fruits, vegetables, grains, dairy, and protein food. Do your research. Like I always say, do your research, do your homework, do your due diligence before investing in any business sector. Study the market, alright? You know, most African delicacies make use of grains and spices a lot. So study the market and see which one suits you best and go for it. And like I said, food is something that people will always need, so the demand keeps increasing, and concentrate especially on healthy food, for that is the order of the day in Africa. In 2022, the healthy food market size was valued at $945.9 billion, and it was projected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 4.50% from 2023 to 2032. So you can imagine how much those who invest in this sector are cashing out. The growth rate is alarming. And when it comes to food in general, the highest growing sector and most lucrative one is the African snack business. Yes, that is some business that if you invest your money in, honestly, you are going to be cashing out real big. Like I said in my previous videos, you could actually start your plantation, for instance, where you grow something like plantain and go for plantain chips, or maybe you grow peanuts and go for peanut snacks and many others. You could grow cashew and produce cashew nut snacks. So there is a large variety of things you can actually embark on, produce them yourself or grow them yourself, and go ahead to transform them yourself. And by doing so, you are going to be cashing out times 3, times 5, and more. Can you imagine that as I'm talking to you right now, the market volume of snacks is about $204 billion. So this isn't something to take for granted. So like I said, do your research, do your homework, and try as much as possible to find what suits you best and invest your money in it, and you're going to be thanking me later. That leads us to the next business sector, which is accommodation or real estate. The real estate sector in Africa is booming at its peak right now, and it is due to two main factors. We've got the rural-urban migration and the natural population growth rate in cities that are quite increasing in geometric rates, therefore speeding up the figures. Just so you have an idea of how much real estate or accommodation is needed in Africa, let's consider the urbanization of Africa. Africa has actually got the fastest rate of urbanization across the globe, and according to Statista, Africa's urbanization is set to cross 50% in the next 10 years. Now, Nigeria, that is the biggest economy in Africa, has already crossed 50%. And considering the fact that Nigeria has got about 220 million people, that literally means that 110 million people in Nigeria live already in urban areas. And imagine in the next 10 years. And as I'm talking to you right now, Nigeria already has a deficit of about 20 million homes, alright? Now, this is just Nigeria alone. If we look at countries like Djibouti, they are at about 78% urbanization. And to crown it all, a country like Gabon is at 90% urbanization. That is to say, the figures projected were far much lower than reality, alright? So imagine what Africa's urbanization will look like in 10 years to come. Now, considering the fact that as of now, Africa's population is at about 1.5 billion people, and it is projected to double by 2050. And by that 2050, 2/3 of Africa's population will actually be living in cities. So imagine the rate of urbanization by then. And you know, right now, there's this trending back to Africa movement. A lot of African diaspora is actually returning to Africa. And all of those people are going to be needing accommodation. They are going to be increasing the urbanization of Africa, and they will need accommodation. So in the next 30 years, Africa will be accommodating an additional 950 million people, which will obviously create another spike in the urbanization of Africa. And that is before the 2050 spike. So you can now understand why smart entrepreneurs are rushing to invest in real estate in Africa, alright? Now, if you are also a smart goal-getter out there, you know exactly what to do with your money. There are a lot of investments in the real estate sector, alright? When we talk of accommodation, we've got things like the Airbnb that is booming in Africa right now. We've got hotels, guest houses, schools, residential and commercial apartments. There are a lot of things that you could actually do in Africa when it comes to accommodation, alright? To cut it short, just know that in Africa right now, any business that has to do with real estate is very, very lucrative. Now, let's look at education. Alright, this is another pillar of business in Africa. Education is something highly needed. The African governments are trying their best, but their best is not enough. So consequently, Africa needs a lot of private schools or private institutes in order to balance the equation. The growing population is alarming, and the government really can't cope with the growing population. So private schools are always needed. Training schools are needed. From elementary schools to training schools, all of those institutes are needed. Take note of the fact that more than 60% of Africa's population is below 25 years, and they are mostly students. The governments are really trying their best at the level of elementary schools, that is basic education. But when it comes to higher education, training schools, professional schools, private universities, and you name it, there is a big void. But the only African countries that are really trying in this sector are South Africa and Egypt. So the rest are still struggling a lot to cope with the increasing population. There are schools that are needed. Like I said, especially schools in the higher education sector, alright? So if you've got some money sitting in your bank account and you want to invest in Africa, if you are the African diaspora or whosoever watching this video, please, this is something to take seriously. And you know, schools will always be needed. There are a lot of youths right now who want to be trained and learn skills, and there is a huge need for some specific type of universities that can actually only offer certain courses to African students. That is going to actually limit the amount of students or youths who go out of Africa in order to study those courses, all right? And I know this is not cheap, all right? So if you've got some huge money sitting somewhere in your bank account, please try as much as possible to invest in the educational sector of Africa. On to the next, we are going to be reviewing the healthcare sector. Yes, this is one of those sectors in Africa that is very, very lucrative and delicate at the same time. Health facilities, especially those of standards, are really needed in Africa. You must have noticed, or if you are in an African country, you will agree with me that most of the wealthy or the well-to-do in our societies or the big gurus in the government institution always fly out of the country to get themselves treated. And that literally means that there is a lack at the level of high quality standard hospitals in Africa. When it comes to healthcare, South Africa is doing great. Kenya is also trying, all right? But for the rest of African countries or most African countries, they are still struggling with the health sector to meet up with the international standards right now. We already know that we can't really count on the government for everything, all right? At times, there are certain things that we need to take upon ourselves to change. We need those facilities. We need those up to standards clinics or hospitals, all right? Unlike what you think, Africans right now really can afford those services, all right? So the elite flying out of the African countries to get treated abroad are actually just a drop of water in the sea. The rest of the African population really need those high-end hospitals to get treated as well. And like I said, most of them right now can afford it. Another reason why these infrastructures are really needed in Africa is the fact that it is going to limit the amount of African youths who go to study abroad and don't come back to the continent. So it is actually going to limit the brain drain rate of Africa. That is, those people leaving Africa to go and work abroad are going to actually have the structures here to work in. We know a lot of medical personnel get trained abroad and work there. But if they had such structures in Africa, some of them, if not most of them, will gladly return to Africa and work. And it is as a whole going to benefit the whole of Africa. Yeah, South Africa's care index is 63.5, while Kenya scores 61.5. Now, talking of healthcare, let me just attach the fact that healthcare centers are needed alongside healthcare machines. So if you import and sell healthcare machines or healthcare appliances, you are going to be making a lot of money as well in Africa. So the health sector is actually very, very lucrative. So you could sell to private clinics or government hospitals, all right? So if you could import things like ultrasound and CT scanners, anesthesia machines, you are going to be making a lot of profit in Africa. And last but not the least, as concerns the health sector, you could invest in fitness, all right? Be a fitness instructor or trainer or coach, or actually open a gym to make sure people keep fit. So there are a lot of gaps to fill when it comes to health sector in Africa. Now, before we continue, please do well to like this video and share it with your loved ones if you find value in it. And also, you could join our membership as well. For on there, we upload exclusive content. Now, on to the next, we are going to be talking about logistics, all right? Transportation. Now, when it comes to logistics, needless to remind you of the rapid growth of urbanization in Africa. All of those people are going to be needing transportation for themselves or their goods, all right? And you know, Africa has got a lot of deficits when it comes to transportation. We suffer a lot when it comes to farm to market roads. They are very bad, all right? So we need things like bulldozers, pickup trucks for such roads. When it comes to delivery services, we need things like tricycles, mini trucks, and other forms of transportation. There's a lot of buying and selling going on. There's a lot of import and export going on. So if you are actually a smart entrepreneur, you are going to consider the logistics sector of Africa. And also, the good thing with logistics is the fact that it is one of those businesses that you could actually start making your profit from day one. all right? That is, if you invest in a tricycle or in a pickup truck, you can actually start transporting people and goods from the same day and start making money. There are not obstacles or a period of time that you will need to wait for the business to stabilize like other sectors before making money. You start making your money immediately. Now, you could go for the inbound logistics, which has to do with the means through which materials and goods are brought to a said company. So the whole process of ordering, receiving, storing, transporting, and managing income supply, you can make a lot of money in that sector. Now, you could also go for the outbound logistics. So this has to do with the transportation and delivery of goods, all right? So unlike the inbound that has to do with transportation of goods within the company or into the company, this one has to do with the transportation of those goods out of the company. So here we talk of transportation of goods to other companies or individuals. So literally it has to do with the outflow of goods from the company to the final consumer. Now, another option you could actually go for as well is the third-party logistics. So this is actually the most commonly practiced logistic structure, all right? So this has to do with the transportation of the goods from the manufacturer to the wholesaler in the middle, and from the wholesaler to the customer's business, all right? So my white honey, for instance, is a good example of this, right? So the white honey moves from the locals, who are the farmers, to me, who is the wholesaler, and on to the next, who is the customer business, that is my clients, all right? So my clients are the third party. So basically, it is a service provider business that arranges or handles a variety of supply chain functions for a business. Now, last but not the least option, you could actually go for the reverse logistic. But this is something that is not quite popular in Africa, all right? You know, most African business people don't believe in returning of goods, all right? Once you've bought something, it is sold and hasn't got anything to do with the company again. So this logistics structure actually has to do with returning goods back to the seller or the company. And also it could deal with the recycling of goods. And like I said, this isn't quite practiced in Africa. So this is something that if you want to try, you are going to be doing it for the first time, and one never knows, it might still work for you. There is always a beginning to everything, right? And don't forget the transit companies, all right? It is another logistic module. There are lots of transit companies out there, and also you could actually invest in logistic companies that could actually bring you a lot of money. You know about DHL, right? That is an example of a logistic company. We've also got UPS Supply Chain Solution and many more. So there are a lot of business structures that you could pick from the logistics sector to invest your money in and cash out real big. That said, I believe I've given you the 5 pillars of business in Africa, and I can assure you that if you invest your money in any of these business sectors and do it right, you are going to be making a lot of millions in no time. That said, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.